Welcome to another edition of CHP Talks. We are here today with special guest Dr. Ann Gillies, and we are going to be talking about Bill C-6 and some of the associated issues related to the topic of gender. And so, Rod, why don't you give our guest a proper introduction?
Well, it's a real privilege to have Dr. Gillies with us today. Dr. Gillies is trained jointly in professional counseling and theology, earning a PhD in philosophy of professional counseling from Liberty University with a primary focus in attachment theory, complex trauma, and sexuality. Her research revolves around adult attachment, same-sex attraction, gender dysphoria, and the current controversy regarding conversion therapy. Ann has recently retired after 25 years of counseling, focused primarily on individuals struggling with complex traumatic stress. She is also an ordained pastor, an international speaker, author, and founder of Restoring the Mosaic. Great title there of an organization. A ministry which seeks to educate and inform politicians, community leaders, and pastors through conferences, seminars, and workshops across Canada. Ann is also a chaplain coordinator with the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team in Canada, leading chaplaincy teams into places of disaster and teaching Sharing Hope in Crisis for the Billy Graham Rapid Response Team training. Wow, long organization title there. And she also taught at 2 Canadian Bible colleges, providing a variety of courses such as counseling skills, counseling theories, individual counseling, developmental psychology, marriage and family, divorce and remarriage, and so on. Ann is the author of 2 books. Deep Impact is one, which is about integrating theology and psychology in the treatment of complex trauma, and Closing the Floodgates, which is setting the record straight on gender and sexuality. I've had the opportunity to read that book. It's a wonderful book, very informative, and I'm so thankful that there are people bringing this information to the public. Ann is currently completing her 3rd book with a working title of While We Were Sleeping, another great title there. Looking forward to seeing that. She is a married mother of 6 children and 12 grandchildren, and this fuels her passion for presenting accurate clinical information on the subject of conversion therapy. Her missive is to stand firm, walk cautiously, and live courageously. And I think she does all 3 of those things. You can reach Dr. Gillies through her website by email at restoring.the.mosaic@gmail.com. Dr. Gillies, thank you so much for joining us today. We're really looking forward to this conversation.
You're very welcome. And when you read all that, I think, did I really do all that? Oh, anyways, it's all the gray hair. That's it all helps. But I'm very happy to be here. And when we were chatting earlier, sometimes the way we're led through life, we really don't see. Of course, we don't see where we're going to end up, right? And right. So it's a very interesting journey that I've had, and I'm sure each one of you has had. And for such a time as this.
Right. That's right. You were mentioning also that you've actually added another title, another affiliation more recently. Do you want to tell us briefly about that?
Oh, yes, this is very recent, but I'm also now the Canadian representative for the International Federation for Therapeutic Counseling Choice. That's a mouthful, but this is a really, really great organization of professionals that put on really good workshops. There's a great website. You can use that acronym to find their website, and it is very professionally done, and helping people understand that they have choices and that you can make the choice, if you so desire, to seek counseling for unwanted same-sex attraction or gender ideology that you're struggling with.
That's the IFTC. Is that right?
IFTCC, yes.
Oh, TCC. Okay.
Well, I think that also brings us then right to the question of the day, which is Bill C-6 what it stands for and what it really gets wrong. And I think that might be the best place for us to just start and launch out from there. Do you want to take our listeners through that?
Well, first of all, Bill C-6 is very ambiguous. I find that there's a lot of need for clarification in this bill. I don't have it right in front of me today. I should maybe have had that right forefront, but it talks, of course, about conversion therapy. And right from the beginning, it talks about the myth of conversion therapy and the myth of the fact, what they're saying is a myth that people can change. But that is actually the myth. The myth is that we can change. There is no immutability about same-sex orientation or even gender ideology or gender expression. It's very changeable. It's very fluid, and that has been proven scientifically. And so those kind of things that they are suggesting with this bill, it makes you want to shake your head because it's totally diametrically opposed to current research. And much of the bill, it's not talking about the coercion in therapy that we've heard in the media. It's basically attacking therapists for talking to clients who come to them willfully. I've never had a client come in with their hand tied behind their back and say, "Oh, I think I need counseling." I mean, that's just not how it happens. Now, there may be the odd wife that has pushed and pressured her husband to sit in my office because she thinks he needs counseling, and the likelihood is that maybe both of them do. But the fact of coercion in therapy is just way out there. So those are kind of a couple of the things that I see with this bill. It doesn't really, it says it's for minors, and yet there's been all kinds of talk throughout the debate and talking about it being like as adults, and so it's very broad and poorly defined.
Well, minors are actually getting quite a bit of propaganda, I'm going to say, but basically, in a way, a form of counseling through the education system to adopt and adapt to and almost to seek gender confusion, or what I would call gender confusion, but certainly alternate lifestyles, and to find themselves and so on, in a way that I think has maybe prompted a lot of young people to experiment in lifestyles that they might not otherwise have done. So to say, well, there's no possibility of speaking to them about returning to their birth gender, birth sex, a lifestyle consistent with that seems quite strange to me.
Well, and what I found as I'm listening, there were 2 or 3 members of the Justice Committee who were particularly antagonistic to those who testified about successfully changing and desiring to do so, and were living their lives in accordance with their own belief system, and had found great happiness in coming away from the unwanted same-sex attraction and thoughts and behaviors. And those individuals were quite, I don't know if the word is attacked, but it was like their testimonies are really not important. It's almost like you disqualify the individual. We're really willing and wanting to listen to those who are saying, I was tortured, I was subjected to this emotional pressure, all of these things. And my concern with all of that is, where's the proof? Is anyone asking for proof?
Hmm.
And if this is happening, as one social worker appearing before the Justice Committee said that this conversion therapy is happening at an alarming rate. And I just shook my head and went, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? What do you mean alarming rate? They have no basis or statistics for those things. One of the, actually, let me just mention this. Am I going on too long? Can I just mention this study?
Please.
Well, one of the basic Canadian study that's being used to support all of these allegations is the Trevor Project by Dr. Travis Solway. And I mean, there are so many, there's 13 different methodological errors with this study, from the non-randomized sample. And it's not that you can totally randomize the sample. I don't want to get into too much psychobabble here, but the problems with this study are quite extensive. And the issue that she's saying at an alarming rate comes from this study, which is not substantiated. It's not peer reviewed. It really, I kind of shake my head and go, why are they putting so much emphasis in this one particular study? Well, because quite honestly, the way it's presented shows that there's great harm and no effectiveness in what they call conversion therapy. And that is actually fraudulent. There is great effectiveness, and it's been statistically realized, scientifically, research-wise. There are significant changes for people. And it's not just the sexual orientation, but their whole lives are changed through therapy because they begin to have hope. They receive greater insight into who they are. They develop better coping strategies. This is all documented, but nobody seems, well, the activists are not listening, and the politicians, even the ones who want to listen, are being shut down. So it's a pretty, this bill, I think, has severe ramifications for the LGBTQ, and especially for our young people. And that's very, very concerning.
Mm-hmm. Well, we were together at a rally in Ottawa on December 4th, and one of the main things I pointed out was it's basically a one-way street. There's in fact surgery is allowed for those who want to transition to something other than their gender at birth, but if they ever want to go back, they're going to find it very, very difficult.
That's something too, Peter, that is very disconcerting, because there are a lot. In fact, in 2016, one report showed that 17% of those who are transitioning are actually wanting to detransition. Well, that's fairly high. Yeah. I mean, it's not 50%, and I think it's actually increased as the years have gone on, but they can't get help if they're detransitioning. It's only one way.
Yeah. So there's a term that you had used, and I think it's something that might become a little more common in the weeks and months ahead, change allowing therapy. Is that something that you just want to maybe elaborate on? Maybe it was the first time I had heard it when you mentioned it just when I spoke to you last, but it might be something I think that we should be in the know on.
Yeah, I think so. I think, you know, as a therapist, everything that we do is about change. People come to us because they want to change something in their lives. So I'm not talking about the LGBTQ. I'm talking about just the general public who come for therapy. So whether it's marital therapy, whether it's a personality disorder, whether it's a mental illness, whatever the issue, people come for a lot of different reasons. And they come because they want to change something. And often they don't know what they need to change or want to change. I mean, the role of the therapist is just to allow them to seek out those kind of things, to find out what they want to do. Often they need that, when you're talking to someone, all of a sudden it's like the lights come on when you say it out loud. And so change allowing therapy is really a great way to express this. And when you talk about those with unwanted same-sex attraction, and one of the things that Bill C-6, well, it's not just one, but it really attacks the LGBT community in the fact that those who have pervasive same-sex pornography, pornographic addictions, this bill will not allow us to treat those people. We will not allow, it does not allow you to reduce unwanted same-sex behavior of any kind. So for instance, if someone were to come to me, a gay man perhaps, who is struggling with homosexual addiction, which is a real issue, especially for gay men, extremely promiscuous culture, and they want to change, I can't help them. They want to reduce the sexual activity because they're maybe in a relationship, maybe a gay relationship, or maybe if someone with pervasive same-sex attraction thoughts that's in a heterosexual marriage, has children, but they do not wish to continue thinking that way or to act on those thoughts. I won't be able to treat them, and neither will any other therapist, neither will any pastoral counselor, although it's not indicating that directly in this bill. It just says any treatment or service. So we are doing a huge disservice. So someone who wants to reduce their same-sex orientation thoughts because, or attraction thoughts for a coworker, or for minors, what about pedophiles? This bill means that we cannot treat a pedophile who wants to stop, and anyways, they probably, we would say non-offending pedophiles, I guess, in the sense that it's in their thoughts to abuse a child, but we wouldn't be able to treat them if their thoughts were directed toward the same sex. So this is a really draconian bill.
Yeah. Dr. Gillies, what do you think is driving the, the energy, it's negative energy on the left, including our Prime Minister and his caucus, but throughout Parliament and even across the country, because the city councils have introduced, as you know, these bans. They kind of led the way. I don't know if they were pushed or or pulled, but anyway, what is driving that extreme, eagerness, I guess, to pass this kind of legislation? What's behind that?
Well, this isn't something that's just come to light in the last, well, it's come to light recently, but it's been brewing for decades. My belief is for sure that, and I think it will be supported. Certainly I talk about that in my book, Closing the Floodgates, when I talk about the gay mandate. And so there is, in 1973 and then again in 97, there's just been this trajectory that's been happening to normalize homosexuality, to normalize different expressions of sexuality now, like polyamory. I mean, there's so many, the list goes on. And to actually bring this into the mainstream, which the media has been doing very successfully, because there is I would call LGBTQ activists behind this, and there's a lot of big money behind this. Why? I can't really go into that. I don't know what the, well, I have my suspicions. In many ways, I think this is kind of this sense of pushing humanity into a direction that most people would never, ever think of going. And the majority, the populace, would never think of going there. But you see, because it's been instituted in a very methodical, strategic way by the LGBTQ, we're already there.
Yeah.
Our society has really bought into a lot of lies, the born that way lie. To me, that's probably one of the most significant ones. And I'm very angry about that, the born that way lie, because Dr. Diamond talks about that. Lisa Diamond, who is a lesbian and is very influential researcher out of California. She was part of the American Psychological Association's task force on gender and sexuality. And she has basically said that to the LGBTQ that they need to stop promoting the born that way myth. There is no research to substantiate it, but you see, for 40 years, we've been inundated by academics, because academia is corrupt, absolutely corrupt in this area of humanities, and particularly with the LGBTQ. And we've been inundated as a society, and with this ideology and these thoughts that are absolutely fraudulent. So here we are at this time in society and history, and it's pretty hard to go back. What I think should happen is the APA should be sending out a statement and retracting all of their misguided information. Mm-hmm. And of course, they're not going to do that because they're pushing for more in the area of conversion therapy. So there you go. I really went a long way for a little question. So, but it's been very strategic, and what's brought us to this point.
So looking forward, you're writing another book. Is there are you going to be dealing with some of these themes in your next book? Do you want to give us a little preview of what you're thinking about and writing about now?
Well, I've got about 4 chapters partly done. I thought I would be a lot further. It was my year's project, I thought, but it turned out that conversion therapy bill bans and bill C-6 became my year-long project. So yes, all of the things we've talked about. I see this book kind of a continuation from Closing the Floodgates. Maybe in a more general term, well, I don't know. Closing the Floodgates dealt from everything from the sexual revolution, the contributors to the sexual revolution with Kinsey, right up to where do we go next as far as all of the sexual things coming out, what's good, how people can express themselves and sexually. So in that sense, this one might be more specific toward the transgender phenomenon. There'll certainly be 2 or 3 chapters on that. That's a really big issue. There'll be a whole chapter, I think, on detransistors, because I really want to be focusing on that. I think as well, I want to spend more time with the issue of trauma. So here's something, and I did mention this to you 2 earlier before we were on the air, that one of the things that's also pushing this Bill C-6 and this agenda forward is the thought that there is no wrong kind of sexuality, which comes directly from Kinsey in 1949, really, and that children are sexual beings from birth onward. But this idea as well that those within the LGBT community don't need to be fixed, and that there is no brokenness there. So I think certainly that will be part and parcel within this book, because I think we need to really get a grasp on brokenness hits every individual. We're all, and because I'm a believer, this is my focus and my sense, that we are all the same at the foot of the cross. We are human beings, and it doesn't matter, where we've been or what we've done. We are by sin. And whatever the sinfulness, whether it's gluttony or whether it's anger and rage or murder or sexual sins. In fact, I would say that every single individual has sexual brokenness. Every single individual has some kind of sexual, and it may not that they've been involved in something, but there's a brokenness in humanity, and it goes right to our very core. So the fact that within the LGBT community, there is this push to just close their eyes to the brokenness of the people around them, and that is very that's so harmful. It really shuts people down from sharing. If you say, "Oh, that didn't happen," or you're lying, or I don't want to hear about what happened to you, then people just push themselves further inward, right? Instead of coming open, which we've been struggling for a society that would be more open.
Yeah.
And now it's closing up again.
Yeah.
Wow. So you're really getting at that deeper philosophical level.
Yeah.
And it's very important. Thank you. Yeah.
Dr. Gillies, a couple of things we received a note yesterday. I think it was from Parents as First Educators, but anyway, a concern that the tactics in the House of Parliament was some conservatives who would oppose this bill normally maybe voted for it at second reading in order to put it into committee where they hoped to have some amendments made, and the amendments were all voted down. Except for actually an amendment making it even worse than it was. And now it'll be coming back for a vote by likely the Liberal left-wing majority, which includes the NDP, of course, and even a surprising number of Conservatives. So that's one, just a concern. But I guess looking forward, also, you mentioned that there is this acceptance, a growing acceptance of the claims of this agenda, right? Do you see pedophilia being one of the battles that'll have to be fought in the future? If the trend continues, will we be having this discussion in a few years and people saying, well, there's nothing wrong with pedophilia, it's the man-boy love association idea and all that? Do you see that coming?
I think it's already here.
Okay.
I think in many ways, certainly academic has been pushing it. Now, I'm not suggesting that every academic is in favor, but for many years, there's been an element within academia that have been pushing for pedophilic relationship and the observance that this as well is normal and healthy, and it does not harm children. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, that makes my blood boil. There is nothing that makes my blood boil like talking like that. And the fact against all research on child abuse, child development, everything that is out there that even common sense, right? A parent would protect their children at all costs against rape. And so we changed the terminology. We call it sexual abuse. We want to minimize. We continually are changing the language around all these things our society is, and it's being propelled by activists to minimize impact. Well, I'm all about maximizing what's happening to our children. And I think certainly in my book, I talk about what happened in 2014 with the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. There was a large group of professionals who wanted pedophilia to be removed as a mental illness and to be made an orientation, just the way that homosexuality was in 1973.
Mm.
That was in 2014. They didn't succeed. Pedophilia is still in the diagnostic manual as a mental illness, but we are now at 2020, and the next writing of this manual will bring these people out of the woodwork again. Not that they're very deep in the woodwork, but they will be pushing for pedophilia to become an orientation. So let's think about that a little bit, because what's happened with homosexuality since it became an orientation? Well, it was legalized, right? It became a legal entity. You could not, and I'm not saying whether or not that should have happened.
Yeah.
I don't think that homosexuality is in itself a mental illness. I don't. I think there are, I have some other ideas about that, but to make pedophilia an orientation opens up the whole area, or maybe I should say closes up the area of legally charging someone with raping a child,
Mm.
because pedophilia is anything under 16, and it's happening all over. That sex slavery and all of those things, we never heard of those things. Rod, when you and I were growing up, we never heard. And not that it maybe didn't happen, but it's become prolific as many other things now in our society.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow. Well, it's not a very nice place to leave the conversation for today, but are there any closing thoughts that might be of encouragement or at least motivation to our listeners?
So, yeah, I want to. Oh, yes, I'm thinking it isn't a very good place to leave people. But what I want to say is it's everyone's personal responsibility. Every parent, you have a responsibility to your children to parent them as well as you possibly can with the knowledge that you have. And that I would say really it's parents and grandparents that can actually turn things around. But we can't do that unless you understand the dire straits we're in. So sometimes bad news can be turned into good news if people will join together and really get behind something that is positive and that wants the best for our generation and for our future generations.
Well, and I would just like to say,
said.
Dr. Gillies, that we're so appreciative that there are people like you. Maybe there's nobody quite like you, but there are people with the background, the academic background and the clinical experience that has strengthened the movement, has given people facts, statistics, and an understanding, because many of us have these, have a dire sense of where society's at. We want to do something about it, but in order to properly present those ideas in the public square and in Parliament, there needs to be the background that you bring to the table. So again, thank you for your work in doing that and consistently doing that. And we really appreciate having you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you. And as you said earlier, it seems that you've been called for such a time as this, and God bless you in your efforts. And thank you all to all of our listeners for listening. We hope you've learned much and have been encouraged and informed and perhaps warned. And may that please do share this message with others. If you're subscribing to CHP's podcast in any way, shape, or form, please pass this on to others, because so many in our society need to wake up. So thanks again. God bless you all. Hope to see you again next week for another edition of CHP Talks.
Thanks a lot.